take a seat, please. It's time for us to start up again. We are due to start 34 seconds ago. So everybody take a seat, please. That's JFC right there. They cute. Jackie's making everybody sit down, behave themselves. You can tell they're being really naughty over there.
Oh.
Right.
Dr. Keiko Nakamura is going to be sharing a little bit about her expertise with picking samples, kind of like everybody did with Strange New Planet. Go ahead, Keiko.
All right. So I would like to start talking about...
So we are returning to University of Arizona for our next presentation. Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. OSIRIS-REx is housed at University of Arizona. So, but that's right. We're at Johnson Space Center. That's where the scientists that are participating on any mission are from all over the country, even all over the world, depending on their expertise. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Jackie Allen, who is leading the group at Johnson Space Center.
Hello. We're going to hear from Keiko Nakamura, Dr. Keiko Nakamura-Messenger. Yes, on her official name. And she's going to share with us a little bit about sample return with OSIRIS-REx. And hopefully, and some of you did with Strange New Planet, you connected with where the best samples might come from. And Keiko's going to share a little bit more about the reality.
Okay. So every day I deal with Astromaterials on my hand, actually. And I would like to start my talk with why do we study Astromaterials? How do I forward the slide? Next. That's right here. So I don't want to talk about other scientists' interests, really, but Astromaterials, for me, why am I interested in is that meteorite, lunar material, and comet dust, they all contain the building block of the solar system and beyond. And to me, that studying meteorites and cometary dust is an extreme way of studying origins, myself, our ancestry, where we are coming from, and are we really alone? Those kind of naive question that we have as a teenager, I kept it go on, and I'm studying meteorites and that Astromaterials and trying to know those juvenile questions. And next slide, please. When I was a teenager, I wanted to be an astronomer. To study those primitive bodies. But later on, I realized that there is a study of actually you can put the stuff on your hand and using microscopes instead of telescopes, you can study heavenly bodies. My interest is in, especially in cometary dust. Comets is, of course, we believe that is a very icy material, but now we don't really know it's just a chunk of ice. We can't even separate if it's a comet or asteroid. There is somewhere between. So to me, comet and asteroid are same sort of material. Next slide, please. instead of becoming astronomer, I become a material scientist. My specialty is in crystallography and micromineralogy. Go down into the nanoscale. I usually study organic materials in meteorites, but I happen to discover 2 new minerals. There are 5,000 minerals in the list as an International Mineralogical Association approved minerals. The 2 minerals I discovered, brownleite and wassonite. Brownleite is from a comet dust, and wassonite is from a meteorite. These 2 minerals are the 2 smallest minerals ever discovered and ever approved among the 5,000. And those 2 are pretty simple mineral. Brownleite is MnSi, manganese silicite, and wassonite is titanium sulfide, Ti1S1. The other one is Mn1Si1. So very simple. We synthesize these materials for the future semiconductor materials and stuff, but in the space, they generate these. So discovery itself, to me, it's great so that my mother in Japan can hear about me on the newspaper and such. However, discovery in these astromaterials is very important because knowing these new materials in there limits some temperature, pressures, how it's formed, and then that kind of condition is actually there in space, in this meteorite, in that asteroid, so that we can narrow down those formation conditions and alternatively knowing the formation of solar system. So next slide, please. Here at Johnson Space Center, we have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different collections of the astromaterials. First, everybody knows that 6 Apollo mission samples, which totals 380 kilograms of lunar rocks. And we also have 20,000 meteorites, not completely 20,000, but in the United States, we gathered meteorites from Antarctica, 20,000 of them. Next slide, please. So I also joined that Antarctic meteorite expedition. When we go to Antarctica, this is the ice patch is blue and white part is snow. These tiny, tiny white dots are our tents. Next slide, please. So this is the zoom-up view at me waving. This is actually picking up airplane, so that we were very happy after 6 weeks in that isolation. Next slide, please. We have skidoo for each person, drive, and then in this field, every 5 minutes, we have black specks on the ice ground. That is meteorite. Next slide, please. And then collect those meteorites. I'm struggling to open that plastic bag to store that rock. It's very cold. We don't want to take off the gloves. Next slide, please. And then after 6 weeks on ice, in one season, 1,430 meteorites we gather. So that includes mostly from asteroids, and then sometimes we have Martian meteorites most of the time, almost every season, and then 2, 3 lunar rocks as well. So since 1978, next slide, please, we gather 20,000. And then other stuff, the cosmic dust. Next slide, please. Since 1981, next slide, please. We have NASA's high altitude airplane, goes to 20,000 meter high, which is twice as high as our airplane. And then fly around for a couple of hours, and then there's a wing comes out the target, I mean the collector, with filled with silicone oil that doesn't frozen up in a high altitude, so that anything from space or anything from down there from us smash into that oil, and we can correct those samples. But 20,000 meter is pretty high in the stratosphere, so that the volcanic ash and stuff won't reach that high. So most of the stuff on that collector is from space. We don't know if it's from asteroid or comet. As I said, we can't really separate from asteroid and a comet, but that we know that is from space by analyzing the sample. Next slide, please. So each one of them, we pick up these sample. It's from 3 micron to 50 micron, and those are the comet dust. Next slide, please. So compared with my hair, the sample we are dealing with is very small. It's almost 10 times as small as my hair thickness. Cannot see in bare eyes, but there inside lots of discoveries, I mean science inside. Next slide, please. So I myself trained to deal with those small samples, and do I have time? Okay. So later on, I got PhDs, studied in Germany and Japan, came here as a postdoc in 2002, and Stardust mission brought back sample from comet in 2006. I was selected as a sample processor for this mission, worked on that precious comet sample for 4 years, and now I'm assigned to be OSIRIS-REx deputy curator and also sample site scientist. Next slide, please. So now we know we have comet dust and 20,000 meteorites here, including Martian sample, lunar samples, and of course Apollo samples here. Why do we need to go to those asteroids still? Because just go to Antarctica, we can get, thousands of samples. It's very important. We still got to go to out there, because that way we can connect the study of astronomy and also the actual material sample get together, so combined, and then we know a lot more about the formation of solar system and beyond. And especially the OSIRIS-REx is important because we are bringing back very primitive samples containing probably water and carbonaceous materials, organics. And when I say organics, people think that is a living thing, but no. When we say organic, it's a pre-life organic that is originate ourselves. And previously, I showed that slide showing Earth accumulate 40,000 tons every year. This stuff from space. Those 40,000 tons every year, billions of years, accumulate those samples from space containing organics. I believe those are doing something, still for us. Okay. OSIRIS-REx. Okay, next slide, please. So I think you already heard the mission concept and stuff. Next slide, please. So as I said, I'm sample site scientist, which is a big deal to me. I'm still kind of shaky, but I got to do it. My main task is to identify the best value of the sample, where to go, so that we can get the best sample money worth or best interesting sample from that 500-meter asteroid. Next slide, please. right now, so we have a couple of years and several years until we get to the asteroid in 2018. What I'm doing right now is to figure out prioritize where to go and what is the most important thing to think about. Again, the OSIRIS-REx target, RQ-36, is a carbonaceous rich asteroid. We want to get the most carbonaceous rich part. Where to go? Does it have outgassing activity? In that case, yeah, we should go to that place. But then it might blow up the spacecraft, right? So we want to go. We want to go to the best geologically interesting place. But then we cannot touch and go. It's too dangerous. That sort of thing. I wish I could talk about more because this is the most interesting part, but I only have 1 minute. So, and the other part is the curation. It's a lot of tasks. A smaller part is what kind of container is the best container for the carbonaceous thing, the contamination-free containers to ship out to the scientists all over the world. And how do we control the contamination? Can we really control? No, we really can't control, but the best way is to know to minimize the contamination. That we are preparing every single day with my lead curator, Kevin Ryder. Lots of exercise. Of course, we have to build the best facility here upstairs. All kind of things. So I'm having a lot of fun every day. Last 10 years, never get bored. And I just wanted to tell my mother, always wondering, how do you get money just playing with rocks? To me, it's a very important thing, and I hope support us and try to get to know more, and I want to share too. So, all right, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you. And Charlie, is Karen right here? Excellent. Excellent. We're going to go switch PowerPoints here, and Dr. Karen McNamara is going to be with us now. Let's see if this comes up. It's under 4, Jackie. Yep. There you go. All right. Okay, Dr. Karen McNamara, go ahead and tell us about sample challenges.
Okay. Thank you guys for having me here. People will tell you I love to talk about this stuff all the time. So I have a lot of slides here. We're going to go through pretty quick, but I think you'll have a little bit of time to ask some questions. So
that's your mic.
Okay. And where does my...
I right here.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I missed the beginning of Keiko's, but I think she talked about a timeline of sample return and talked about our going to the moon, which is, of course, our first sample return, but very different because obviously we had people there to select the samples, to pick them up, package them, to bring them back. But the thing that is common about those and the sample returns that we do is that when we bring back those samples, we have a lot of opportunity to do work on them. And the lunar samples, in fact, are still being studied very actively today. And some of the things that we're able to do are, for example, when we get an anomalous result, we did not think the moon was made out of cheese, yet there it is in front of us. Well, we can use a lot of techniques, maybe things we hadn't even thought of, to look at that and find out what really is there. We can also, when we have 2 answers that don't match, we can think about a 3rd technique, a 4th technique. So we have a lot of opportunity, and that allows us to explore a lot further because I'm sure Jackie has said before that every time you answer a question, it means you have 5 more. And so having these samples still here, people today can look at the questions that they answered gave them more questions and go on and try to answer those. So the unmanned missions that we've done to date are Genesis and Stardust. And I'll start with Genesis because that was the first one. And this is my basic, this is what the mission is. Essentially, there is solar wind, ionized particles coming from the sun all the time. And we wanted to collect it, so what we did was stick a spacecraft that I'll talk a little bit more about. This is just a schematic, with lots of collectors out in front of the sun, and we let it sunbathe there for a while in order to collect enough material for us to detect. And the reason we want to know about the sun is that for any theory of the solar system, well, the sun is sort of the starting point because it's 99% or more of the entire mass of the solar system. So we ought to know what that is before we start to predict how the other things came about. And you think about, everybody says, how do you collect the sun? All right. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Little kids ask, big kids ask. And it's harder than you think, and it's easier than you think. The reason that we can't do it on Earth is because the Earth has this big magnetic field, and that deflects all of these particles. A very good thing for us, but not a very good thing for studying solar wind. So we have to get outside of that magnetic field. Okay? So we need to be somewhere between here and the sun where that magnetic field ends. Well, compared to the distance to the sun, that's not that big. And in fact, what we did do was go to the point where the gravitational field of the Earth and the sun balanced, because that meant it cost very little energy to stay there. It's kind of, you're at the perfect balance point. But if you look at this chart on the bottom, that's only 1 million miles away. So it's only 1/93rd of the way to the sun. So think about the size of those gravitational fields and the size of those bodies. Keep going. I talked about collecting it in ultra-pure materials. And these are actually the hexagons of, they're about 10 centimeters point to point. And they're made up of silicon, germanium, sapphire, gold on sapphire, diamond. You think, why do we use such expensive materials? It's not because they're expensive, it's because they're pure. These are some of the few materials that we can get in a pure form. So if we keep going. We take those trays. Now we have these big trays of different collectors. And we use different collectors because we want to detect different atoms or different atomic species. And we stack those up and put it in a canister that's internal to the spacecraft. What you see in the gold circle there, that tiny disc in the middle, is a 2.5-inch collector, and that has 4 quadrants made up of silicon carbide and diamond. And those are actually were the most important thing on the spacecraft. So we close that all up, put the canister inside a capsule. We keep going. We put the capsule on top of a spacecraft, and what you see there, the wings there, are the solar panels that are going to come down when it's in space, and put that inside the fairing of a Delta II rocket, and on August 8th of 2001, we launched. So when Genesis is in cruise phase, that is, it's on its way out to that gravitational balance force, or it's on its way back, this is what it looked like without the passengers. Okay, and then the next picture shows you what it looked like when it was at that balance point. This is when it's open, and I said it was sunbathing, and if you look at it, it really is sunbathing. All those collectors are just out there in the sun for 24 plus months. Our minimum collection was 24 months. And you can see every bit of space we used. The lid of the canister, the lid of the capsule. Everything's got a sample on it. Okay. So our exciting day was about 3 years later, September 8th, 2004. It was a Wednesday. And it was about 10:30 when we were supposed to come in. And you remember that trajectory that I showed you? If you saw, we went a long way out of our way to come back. And the reason that we did was if we came directly back from the sun, we would have come in at night. And it's hard to see a parachute at night. So what we did was a flyby of the moon, very similar to the Apollo 13 movie when they do a flyby so that they can minimize their energy and come home. Well, that's what we did. So, and these guys are good, by the way. In every single practice, the helicopter pilots never missed catching the parafoil. So, do you go on? On September 8th, however, there was no parachute. Spacecraft came in beautifully, exactly where it was supposed to be, exactly how it was supposed to come in, until the part where the drogue chute didn't open and then the parachute didn't come out, which meant that the spacecraft, or the capsule rather, hit the ground at 200 miles an hour or more. And you think about it, if you see this capsule's coming in and it's rotating and it's nutating and it's amazingly compact. There's no debris field there. And that is because the Utah mud that landed in is one of the most viscous materials on Earth, or rather, least viscous materials on Earth. It just locked it in instantly. Good in a way for collecting, bad in another way. But we did have plans for what happens if. So if you go on. The first what happens if was we built a clean room, a very large clean room that would allow us to do all the work we needed to do if we had the canister open and if we had to open samples and package them individually and take them back. So we had this large clean room that we built out there. We also had at least 20,000 separate containers clean and barcoded in the event that we had to use them. Okay, so keep going. We, of course, did have to use them. And here you see that, in fact, the canister was breached, not just the capsule. And you see me pulling out some very large samples that were easy to get at. But really, most of them were so small and so difficult to get at that we couldn't do anything in the field. Go to the next one. What we had to do then, the bottom of the canister had actually been sheared off. And so in order to contain as many samples as we could and get them back in the best shape we could, we actually had to turn that canister over onto the lid and use the lid to catch the material. Go on. And then our greatest job was to work to get all of this done and back in the clean room by nightfall. But one thing that you see is these are the concentrator targets I told you about. 3 out of the 4 of them were perfect. And the one that was left, we still had a substantial amount of that material. Go on. The bringing it back upside down was a little bit of a problem later, because the mechanism that held those arrays then had to be dealt with upside down. And so we had to make a rig where we could lay on the floor, take the pieces off, then take each tray one at a time off and do the next tray. Okay, so this is going to be hard to see for some of you, but the point is we started out with 308 collectors, and by the time we left Utah a month later than we were supposed to, we had over 10,000 individually packaged pieces. But because, remember, this is a sample return mission, we can work on these and we can do things we never expected to do. And it's taken us a long time. We thought we'd have the good results in 2 years, and it probably took us 7. But we have achieved 100% of the mission goals. If you go to the next one, quick. The biggest thing that we found out is that all our theories told us the oxygen and nitrogen isotopes in the sun and on the Earth should be the same. And they are not, which means start over again. We need some new theories. But that's a pretty amazing thing, because remember, when I said you come up with a question, you still have samples here to investigate that question further. So I can stop here and
Are we ready for some questions? Thank you, Karen. Is there someone who has a question here? Sherry, all right, go again.
Could you give us a little bit more information about the isotopic differences?
Well, what we did actually, in order to measure the isotopic differences, what we're interested primarily in is oxygen 18, 17, and 16. It's really 17, which is the tiny, tiny, tiny one that we're going for. This is why they have to be so clean. If we got a little bit of background oxygen in there, we're in trouble. So what we used to measure oxygen were silicon carbide 13 and diamond labeled with 13. And the reason is that at C13O17, we have a unique mass signature. And that allowed us to look at that. And in fact, Genesis the mission itself put money into developing instruments ahead of time that we knew we wanted to exist when we came back. That was a major thing missions had never done before. But we knew we didn't have the capability when we launched to do what we knew we wanted to do when we got home. And so Dr. Kevin McKeegan was funded to put together an instrument called a MegaSims. And that allowed us to do this. And what he was looking for, again, was that O17 C13 signature. Now, the difference in the isotopes of the sun and other bodies has to do, and I'm not a solar physicist, so I will summarize this in the simplest and slightly incorrect way, but has to do with the accretion of the planets and how they formed, the temperatures at which they formed, because you get different fluxes of material based on weight at different temperatures. And so it was thought that the inner bodies, which formed obviously rocky bodies, solid bodies, would be different than the outer bodies and would be closer to what the sun's composition was. And that doesn't seem to be true. Actually, the data that we have on Jupiter matches the sun better. So it's certainly not what we thought, but I can't tell you why. In fact, this year at the Genesis Science Team meeting, for the first time, a large part of the participation were solar physicists, because now that we have real data that they can work with, they're really excited to get in and start to look at the theories and how they're going to start to explain this. And I should mention, too, that Stardust adds to that equation.
We have some questions from other sites. Whitney, are you going to do the switching and asking questions at other sites?
Sure thing. So again, people can ask questions of either Karen or Keiko, and our next site would be Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab.
Hello, this is Mohit from JPL, from APL. In addition to getting the radiation from the sun, are there any plans to get equivalent samples from some of the gaseous planets?
No, the only data that we have from the gaseous planets is remote sensing.
Because they do not radiate anything, is that why?
We have remote sensing missions. The only sample return missions we have at this point are the lunar sample return missions by both the U.S. and the Soviet Union, Stardust, Genesis, and soon to be OSIRIS-REx.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I do. My question, more speculation. Has anyone considered building containers in vacuum using the International Space Station? Wouldn't it be more pure to contain these things in?
Interesting idea. Too costly. To control inside the very dangerous and expensive, I think.
Okay, we have a question here at JPL, please.
Do you know why the parachute didn't deploy? Was it because it was overheating because it was so close to the sun?
Actually, as I said, it wasn't really that close to the sun, 92 million miles away from the sun. So, no, in fact, we do know why, and there was an investigation into why. And in fact, the issue was that a mechanical switch, which trips on the basis of the impact to the atmosphere, was not mounted correctly, and so when it hit the atmosphere, it did not get the jolt it was supposed to close the circuit that would then fire the initiators that would release the parachute.
Okay, we're going to go to Arizona now. Question from Arizona?
Now. Keiko, we are mostly school teachers. You explain to us your love of the heavens. How can we inspire our students, even young children, to pursue their passion and to leave their courage, have that courage to leave the comfort zone, to study the thing that they love and then follow the scientific path as you have done? How can we inspire today's school child for this?
What I did last couple of weeks is go outside like 8 p.m. and wait till it becomes dark and then try to see the comet pouncers. That still really excites me, even though I have comet dust inside my hand. Just look the real thing, show the real material. In Arizona, you guys have a big Sutter's Mill meteorite, which fall in California a couple months ago. That just put on hand would get me boiled. So I don't know other kids, but that's the only way. I think the real thing. Pictures is fine. You know, Hubble pictures is great. We never seen those pretty images. You know, when I was little. Now we can see how the star is forming and stuff. You know, that's great too. Is that okay? Answer?
Any more? We probably have time for another question from another site, or we'll move on. Anybody else have another question?
Do we have any more questions? We have one at APL.
This is the year of the large solar flares coming about. Are we able to get some more information, or do we expect some different type of reading because of these large flares than what we had from the past?
In fact, the solar cycle is 11 years. And if you think about that, Genesis was up there during the last solar cycle. And when I showed you those 5 trays, I didn't really have time to talk about why there were 5 of them, why they were different. They could all deploy at different times. And in fact, there was one specifically dedicated to coronal mass ejections. And that was the only time at which that array was exposed. So that, in fact, we did try to differentiate that. And there are people working on that. I can tell you that they have seen differences. I cannot tell you that I know enough to tell you what those differences are. But they're definitely there, and it is absolutely something that we were hoping to capture.
More data to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. It never ends. have one more here.
About a 20-minute slot of time before our next presenters start for site-specific elements. We here at JPL are actually going to run like crazy people to the lunch line. No, we're going to be measured and extremely teachery and appropriate, not like middle schoolers, but at any rate, for the rest of you, you will be either having lunch or a break right now. We will be reconvening at 11:45 here at JPL, and in Arizona, 1:45 at Johnson, and 2:45 at APL. I also wanted to mention to everybody that your presenters' PowerPoints are on the actual original registration website. We have the agenda is on there, the presenters' names, their affiliation, and also these PowerPoints are posted, and so they'll be archived there. So if you want to go back and refer to those, or if you were listening in on the webinar, those are there for you to follow along. Actually, there's a gentleman who was looking on his iPad while he was here. He could have looked if he wanted a closer look at some of these presentations right there. But that's just for your reference, and we'll see you in 20 minutes. So everybody, wait. I was totally joking about the running to the, totally joking.